I noticed that coming to an emerging market, you're getting the benefits of, I want to say, an early mover advantage on a new trend. And we actually came here, and I saw that, and we came here before Scopely's announcement, before, I want to say it was sexy to be here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, so welcome on our second day of Gamepod Podcast here in Dubai, podcast studio, with our next guest, Kareem, CEO founder of Yallaplay. It's a locally based, successful studio, also has a speaker in the current PGC Game Expo, and we'd love to invite him to get us a bit more background of history, how basically he became entrepreneur in gaming, based in the region, and story behind Yallaplay and what the future holds for both Kareem, Yallaplay, and also on the region in his side. So welcome, happy to have you here.
Absolutely, thank you for having me.
So let's start from our personal side. What's your background? How did you decide to become an entrepreneur on the gaming side, and why here?
Absolutely. That's a very profound question for a founder in general, but some background about me without getting too much detail. I used to work in technology back in Austin, Texas. I used to work at Dell Computers. I was a hardware engineering, worked my way through architecture. During these years, about 15 years, I've spent time at Dell, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, and finally Dropbox. So it was a very kind of tech journey beginnings. And at some point, we found an opportunity in the market to essentially build scalable architectures that rely on AI for achieving metrics. And this is when Yallaplay was born. It actually started off as an AI company, and we built our first NPC card game player. And it played cards. And we were very excited. It was during that time when Google acquired DeepMind, and they created these very, very smart chess players, go-go players. And it was just about this, something about artificially intelligent players was just exciting for us. So we built this smart player. But we realized something, that it wasn't about building the most difficult, badass card player. It was about creating something that's fun. And what really fun meant was sometimes the AI should win, and sometimes the AI should lose. And that's when Yallaplay was born, because we found that there's a sweet spot to creating fun, which balances your retention and difficulty and game balance. So we launched our first game called Tarneeb, and that was honestly pretty successful in the Middle East, even though we were back in Austin back then. We had 500,000 fans on Facebook, a few million downloads. And then after this, we've developed our engine and launched our second game called Spades Masters. Now, that's the same point in time when we moved to the Middle East and launched this game for the US market. So kind of going backwards here. Yeah. But to be honest, it was the best thing we've done coming here, because just locally in terms of support we've been getting, the exposure we've been getting, and also my roots are Middle Eastern originally, even though I spent most of my life in the US. So it felt like coming back home and trying to build an ecosystem in an emerging market. And there's a lot of benefits that come around that.
Okay, so thank you for the background story. So maybe if you could get us a sense of timeline here. So,
yep.
What was around the time when you basically started the first, when you basically, I guess, left your job, you left your day salary job at Big Corp, at Big Corp, become an entrepreneur, and what was the time that you actually, or also maybe a bit of a motivational insight, what was the time and why did you decide to move here? It was some certain event that caused you to actually relocate back here, or certain opportunities, or team, like how did you came back after you said 15 years in the US?
20 years.
20 years in the US?
27 years. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
that's where the white hair comes from. So you can calculate.
Because I feel you were kind of because right now there's a big buzz about the region, right? And I'd say from my perspective and some others, so it's very much driven by announcement from Savvy and Scopely acquisition, this big kind of buzzwords and so on. But I guess you were a bit earlier in the stage, and also kind of here in Dubai and Emirates. So what was your kind of momentum or moment where you decided to start here?
It's a few things, I have to admit. Part of it was a personal kind of family thing. That was an initial instinct of maybe coming back here for a visit. And that's when I came here and realized that the UAE government was very, very bullish and very, very proactive on gaming in this space in general. And I've always admired what they've been doing here. And I'll talk about the region more, but kind of focus on the UAE. I've always admired their very forward-thinking. Really, they're always thinking, what will the world be like in 30 years? And they would set their agendas in that way. And being in the US, it was an extremely saturated market. So when we were in downtown Austin, where our first office was, we were competing, trying to hire people with Zynga, with BioWare, Activision, like just big companies. And we were a startup, and we just felt that, okay, we're just a little needle in the haystack, an ant in the grand scheme of things. And I noticed that coming to an emerging market, you're getting the benefits of, I want to say, an early mover advantage on a new trend. And we actually came here, and I saw that, and we came here before Scopely's announcement, before, I want to say it was sexy to be here.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we came before that era, and we got a lot of support from the Abu Dhabi government.
And what was that? So what was the year, if you can share?
2 years ago. So we came here about 2.5 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. So right before the kind of
exactly.
the buses began. Okay.
It's almost right before. Obviously, like it's been maybe a 3 year in the making. Took some time to relocate.
So this is kind of also during COVID, right? Or
yes.
around the COVID time, right?
Yes, towards the end of COVID. And I should mention we have offices in Brazil as well, in Sao Paulo. So we've always had that mindset of kind of an opportunistic setup where it makes sense. Running a gaming studio is expensive. You want to really maximize and be frugal with cash. So and our CTO is Brazilian. So that's where the Brazil piece came in. And with the governments here, they're offering subsidies. And that was the last piece that made the finances make sense for us to relocate here. Because otherwise, cost of living here is actually very expensive compared to other areas of the world where you could set up a gaming studio.
So we've got support from the government.
Yep.
Subsidies. You get a tech team in a efficient market like in Brazil. You've also raised VC funds for a company. And did you raise the locally in the US mix, or how did you kind of structure the whole growth? The growth part of your business.
Absolutely. Mix, actually, the short answer. So, tiny bit US, and then a big bit locally. Even though we were in the US, we raised in the region, and then a part of it also Europe as well. So, at the end of the day, when you're fundraising, I think it's just a matter of finding the right fit for your vision and company. The exact location of the fund might be secondary, but there's a lot of activity now in the space, and we're happy to be at the forefront of that in the region.
And have you moved your headquarters to the UAE? And what have you found now, basing yourself from here? How have you found hiring in the region compared to the US?
That's a great question. So we moved the HQ here, and that had a benefit of tax purposes. So and that's an important thing to engineer managing your finances. And the second piece, I would say the challenge is hiring. So most of the people that we hired, we brought in from abroad, whether it's from Brazil, from Europe, from US. And we've hired, I want to say about 10% locally, or at least that we've met locally, already been here. And I think that's maybe part of the things you have to keep in mind when you're operating in a newer sort of economy or ecosystem.
And how do you feel, so obviously there's a bit of a gap in local talent in the region, both here and probably even in Saudi Arabia to some degree, even though there's a lot of indie developers there. What do you think is needed for the UAE to start growing its own talent, like the rest of the industry does have, like in the US, Brazil, all over Europe? We have a lot of talent that you can move here, but what do you think we need to get some local talent here? What do you think needs to be done?
I think they're doing a lot of the right things already in terms of just marketing the place and sharing the opportunities you have here. There has to be investments from the government at some point. There's either the slow approach, which is leave it to grow organically, and it's going to take time, so people are going to find out about the area, relocate here, or you just, in my opinion, invest heavily and just accelerate that growth of talent here.
I think it was perceived that UAE has basically a head start on these things that, as you said, even before the announcement from Saudis and bunch of kind of a strategic achieve there. There've been studios here. Like Ubisoft's setup is operation in Abu Dhabi and grew it to a certain level. There generally UAE was considered like international hub for doing business in the region with various benefits. And with the, let's say, what it's considered in a good way rivalry in the region that is very interestingly focused on gaming, what do you think is the still advantages of what you perceived here in like having your operations based in Emirates? I know compared, so we discussed that compared to the US or Austin, but region-wise, what do you think it's still like a strong suit of having setting up your global gaming business in Emirates?
I think there's two ways to answer this. Is it from an organization perspective or like from the developers, employees, or a perspective? I can talk both very briefly, but I think from a company perspective, touching back what I mentioned earlier, the opportunities of being kind of a first mover advantage in the space. But in terms of the employees and living here, I mean, we'll have to admit it's a really cool city. So, we're in the gaming industry at the end of the day. We're an entertainment business. Part of our company culture and DNA is to really enjoy what you're doing, what you're working on. And that also implies enjoying where you live. So it's hard to debate the fact that it's a really cool city. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, UAE in general, just a very cool place to live in. So I think even though that's something you wouldn't see in an Excel sheet, but this is an important piece when you're trying to build a company and hire, do people want to live there? Are they there because they want to live there, or are they just there for the job? And as a small company, you want to make sure that your employees are happy. So believe it or not, that was a big drive. And us being in Yas Island, I have to admit, we have a really cool office space. Super cool office space that we could not imagine have received. When I was in downtown Austin, we were in a basement. Literally, we were in a basement. We had no windows. Couldn't even afford rent for a window office. Here we have a view of the Formula One racetrack on one side. The other side we have a sea view. So there's that cool aspect of just being in a newer area and an emerging space.
I've been first time on the Yas Island, and
Yes.
for the White Nights conference, we met before. So I was first time actually in the region and pretty blown away. So maybe if you can talk us a bit more like how's the company culture. So we mentioned that it's important to and part of the value proposition. You're in a cool place, and you mentioned you have a team also in Brazil. So how does it work? Where do you have offices? How many people you have, and what's the plans forward? Are you a fan of okay, you have distributed team, but still they have their own offices, or you have a hybrid, or do you have partially remote? Where do you see it? How do you leverage how Yallaplay deals with this?
Absolutely. So that's a kind of a question that the answer changed over time. So at some point we were very focused in the US, and then Brazil opened up. So then Brazil and the US, and it made a lot of sense. It was the same exact time zone, Texas and São Paulo. And now that we moved here, we have a bit of remote employees as well. And COVID allowed us to become a bit more remote, even though the company has always been built of operating remotely. So, so over Slack, and all our tools, our process have been built around remote. So as far as the company culture, we encourage, everyone says that, but we're generally an employee-first company. I like people to be super excited. I've worked at big corporations, and I've felt that feeling of just having to abide by rules that deep inside I didn't feel actually added value to the company, such as driving and commuting to work every single day and being in the office. So I told people, hey, you can work remotely. We're very flexible on remote work. I'd like there to be an HQ and deliverables on all your projects and what you have to work on. But I also want you to be super excited. So if you're going to not work remotely, if you're going to be working from a beach somewhere, all I ask is please put on your webcam so we can also enjoy the beach view, right?
How do you deal with the different time zones? Because obviously, like, fine to work remote, but if you've got guys in Brazil that are, what is it, like 7-8 hours behind?
Yep.
How does that manage like the workflow between those guys logging on when the people here are logging off? Yeah,
you have to be an autonomous organization at some point. So, and a company built over engineers, I think we're very good at that, and it's something we built into the culture. So everybody knows what they have to do, and it's a matter of checking in at the right time. So even though they're in Brazil, we get a nice 6-hour overlap between their mornings, an hour, second half of the day. So that's a great question, and I would like to say that's a drawback, but it also teaches you to make sure you're optimizing your time, as you don't have that 24/7 overlap with another zone.
And is the goal of the company to stay remote, hybrid remote, or would you want more people to move out here and kind of foster the growth of the region and your offices out in Yas Island?
Good question. So my heart wants one thing, my brain and the investors and our board probably wants something different. I think at the end of the day, you're going to need a mothership of some sorts. You're going to need to meet all the team, touch and feel them. COVID taught us that you need you need to be around people. You can't just stay locked at home. So I believe corporations okay to work remote, but we have frequent trips throughout the year where everybody gets to meet everybody physically. So I think that's important. Now, in terms of company culture, if you're thinking about company valuations, you want to exit. At the end of the day, I feel companies want to buy entities
Yeah.
like
Okay.
with an HQ, with like something I can touch and feel. If you're just 50 developers all over the world, I don't think that's going to work. So we like to say we have two major sort of HQs, if you want. I mean, the legal HQ is Abu Dhabi, but we have these two major zones. And if you want to be on this side or on that side, you have a pick. But the occasional remote employees is fine. That's, I think, the model we're adapting. But that's a great question.
So what inspired me as well as I think for my background is not just game development. It's actually game business, publishing, and so forth. I think also you're a gaming studio, but you have also your own tech. You're very much pitching Yallaplay as the advantage that you have the engine that it's focused on a real-time multiplayer. As you said, the background was before the Gen AI was cool, the OG, the OG exactly. AI you've done before to basically deliver a better experience for players that is adaptive and maximizes the KPI. So and yourself, your background is a pretty hardcore engineering. So if you would say if you look at it as an entrepreneur in the region that is kind of banking on these trends and was a bit. And I guess part of the success that we were kind of a bit earlier than the rest of the flock started looking at it. Do you see some advantages to merging some advantages of the region, some global trends like AI, Gen AI industry? So because I think you're very one of the few companies who kind of have both, not just looking at the game content, but also tech, which is very much focused on AI, such was a talk, and in the region, which is I think currently generating a lot of buzz. So do you see this as a kind of the perfect storm of things for you, or do you see that's also something that you kind of you need to pioneer some of these aspects that kind of make sense because of the talent and whatnot?
Absolutely. First, thank you so much for saying that. It makes some of my white hair turn black again. But you're absolutely right. I think we had to build up our tech over time. So it took a long time to get to this point today. And being at the frontier of trying to build something from scratch is very difficult. There's no reference, as we call it. It's just you're creating your own stuff. You're building new tech. But I feel that's paying off today very lucratively. But it's been a long journey. And at some points, I was like, why not just take the easy route? Just go build a game, man. Forget about the tech, forget about the AI, forget about all this stuff. Like a lot of people are just making money building games. But we knew we were investing in something in the future. I think an example of this would be obviously very different areas, but Tesla. So Tesla's investing in self-driving cars. They're spending a lot of money on self-driving AI, and that hasn't materialized yet. But at some point that will kick in, I believe, pretty hard. So we're almost like this, much smaller company, but that's the vision. You believe in an ethos, you're thinking years in the future, and you start building out the tech, and I think now we're here. But yes, it is a bit of the difficulty would be when you're pitching to VCs or you're pitching to investors, they're used to a specific, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but
yes, but box,
boxes, right? And we don't fit any box.
Yeah.
There's a triangle, there's a square, there's a circle, and then we're like this diamond.
Would you find that's one of your, I was going to ask what one of your major challenges is generally as for Yallaplay and also being in the region? Is it because you're not a typical games company, and is that kind of hard for you to navigate in the industry because of that?
Absolutely. When it comes to fundraising, I basically have to explain my journey, a few times and have to really convince them on the narrative. So it makes it a bit more challenging in general. So at the end of the day, if they believe in the team and the vision and the CEO and the company, then they're ready to write checks. I think that's a good way to do it.
Other than hiring from abroad, is there any other downsides of being in the region and having less competition around you? Is there anything else to keep in mind for guys who also want to relocate out here?
Honestly, not much. I think it's talent is the number one thing. Everything else, we're pretty pleased with that. I mean, there's a lot of benefits of, as I mentioned before, just being, the new kids in the block as well.
Okay, so before we wrap up, maybe the last question, which was actually kind of alluded to what you discussed. As again, I very much empathize. I always try to build something something which is right in between these cookie cutter boxes. And you mentioned as well that ultimately you managed to fundraise primarily in the region and get some other financial support in the region. Can you say that with this, let's say, kind of a more unique concept or hybrid concept that merges tech, AI, gaming, it is also the result that maybe the local capital and local investors and availability of capital is also interested in more and less of the cookie cutter stuff compared to the Western when we are pushing it for the Western investors, or it was more or less you need to do the same. You need to do this. So if you invest that amount of energy in the West, you would be able to raise as much, or not really, because the mix was ultimately here.
You're absolutely right about the amount of energy, and it goes back to your question. I definitely have to spend, I want to say 5x more energy here because there's an educational piece I have to, I hate to say it, but I have to be educating the investor about what we're doing. There's a small trick though. We didn't raise money from gaming investors. Yeah. Because we are a tech play. So we actually raised from classic tech VCs, and that was actually easier. It's when you start approaching a classic gaming company, it's hilarious how they're having a hard time fitting you in a specific box. So are you seed? Are you building a brand new game, or are you building an engine? Or where are you? I'm like, listen, forget about everything you know. And that's the educational piece that makes things a little bit more challenging. But I enjoy that. I enjoy sort of selling our story, and who cares if it doesn't fit an existing narrative.
Okay, so thank you very much for coming. It was super interesting to hear from your side how to do business out of here. So Yallaplay is in a great spot and getting a lot of attention. So I hope that this will help you as well. So thanks again for coming.
Very much.
And
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.